So Kristen and I are going to present the data for the Learning Services team from the Spring 24 testing cycle. And Kristen will begin talking about the different tests that we have, and then we'll go into our results, and then what we do with our results and our plans for moving forward. Good?
Yep. So this slide just kind of gives an overview of the assessments that we administer. There's the M-STEP, and each one actually measures something a little different. The M-STEP measures the student attainment of state standards. So that assessment focuses on state standards, and it's what they call computer adaptive, meaning that when a student answers one question, it then chooses the next question for the student. It will never drop below grade level, but it will be the easier end of grade level versus more challenging if that's how the students are doing, or it'll be more challenging, but always in that grade level band. And they take that for English or ELA in 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and then they take math, same grades, and then science and social studies is grades 5, 8, and 11. And then we give the PSAT 8. We also give 9 and 10, but they're not accountable tests, so we don't get the same results back in the same fashion. But that is given in ELA and math as well, and that's called a multi-stage adaptive test. So people will still say it's computer adaptive, and it is, but instead of choosing the next question based on the response to one question, they take a whole half of the assessment, and then the result of that half chooses the next half of the assessment. So it's a little bit different. It's not as adaptive. And that measures if students are on track to be ready for college. And then the SAT is the same sort of assessment this year, the multi-stage adaptive test that's given in 11th grade. And that measures if students are ready for their readiness for college. State assessments are given for a lot of different reasons. They identify the supports that individual students, school, or districts may need. They also identify successes that are happening out there so others can learn from them. They help us to make changes and inform educational programs at the district and school levels. They measure progress of schools and districts, and it's just one piece of the assessment puzzle, or what we call the assessment system. So speaking of assessment system, a balanced assessment system includes multiple types of assessment that are given for and of learning. Some of the types are formative assessment, interim or benchmark assessments, and summative assessments. And those formative assessments are your classroom type assessments that inform instruction on a daily, a weekly, monthly basis. And then your interim and benchmark assessments are given at the district or school levels, like everyone takes them, to inform. Sometimes it informs instruction delivered by teachers, and other times it helps us inform our programs and what changes need to be made, and to progress monitor how we're implementing curriculum. And then the summative assessment is also given at the classroom level for like a chapter or unit test, but also that's what the state assessments are. They're considered summative assessments or year-end assessments given annually.
So before we jump into our data, things that we have worked on and continue to work on over time are the funding, time, and resource support in the following areas. Specifically in our alignment of K-5 and 6-8 curriculum, that's been a big push for the last 5 years, including both assessments, resources, and the curriculum, as well as instructional practices. We are seeing continual positive trends in those areas. We have also started working, but we always embed our professional learning, targeting into those same areas as well. So we're looking for coherence, vertical and horizontal alignment. As we have gone through the bond and changed our schools around. Our new elementary schools are back to K-5s. Our middle schools are 2 middle schools instead of 3. We have worked really hard to make sure that what is happening on one campus is happening at all of them. A great way to say that is our middle schools run as one mega middle school that just has 2 campuses. So curriculum decisions are made across the district in those areas so that our students are having common experiences and curriculum as they go through. We continue to spot opportunities to align our extended day services. So in fact, right now we are looking at ways to provide additional supports to our students who are not quite meeting our grade level and or could use some extra support in some of the high school, pre-college courses. And then we are continuing to always find ways to develop science, social studies, and STEM as we're looking at what the future holds for our students as they move out into the professional world, making sure that they have those experiences for them, and then always adding additional supports in Tier 2 and Tier 3 in supporting students to grow. So those are what we have focused on up until this point, and then the data as it comes out is what Kristen will present. Oops, sorry, there was one more page. For secondary students, we have we talked earlier today about this, about getting students into Algebra 1 and being successful in Algebra 1 in 8th grade. So we have 50% of our 9th graders currently took Algebra 1 in 8th grade, so they are able to get to those higher math courses. That also translates also into their science courses and their ability to take on physics, chemistry at younger ages. We've changed our middle school schedule around, so we have increased time in those core academic areas. We have continued to work and push to have our students have access to AP and IB tests and those courses. And then the last two are really about how we are starting to see where we brought in Envision Math and then Big Ideas Math that is coming through. So now our 9th and 10th graders have had a longer time with those programs as we move forward. So we're seeing increased results for that because it's becoming a more coherent curriculum. There we go.
So the next two slides are going to share the MSTEPS results for grade 3-7. This one's ELA. And the next one will be math, and this is just how Bloomfield Hills performed within Oakland County, and you can see that we are at the top end with our county neighbors.
And math? Yeah.
And then same thing with math. We're at the top end of the county. The next two slides are the PSAT 8, and although we call it ELA, it's actually called EBRW, or Evidence-Based Reading and Writing, just in case we kind of use the terms interchangeably, but that's what a College Board uses. And you can see that Bloomfield Hills was the top in the county for the 8th grade for the ELA, and also top in the county for the math. The next two are the same slides again, but these are for the 11th grade SAT. So you can see that although it looks like we're a little bit farther over, those like 4 or 5 there are so very close. There's not much of a difference, but we are still at the left side of the graph. And same thing here for the math. And you can see the scores, even the percentages across the county are very different from ELA to math.
For sure.
So the My Access is the MSTEP for our significantly cognitively impaired students. There are 3 levels of that assessment. There's My Access participation for the most severely cognitively impaired. Then there's supported independence and functional independence. And these are the students that have an adjusted curriculum and are meeting adapted state standards. They're not always, their goal is not always all of the state standards. So this is just an overview of what My Access is. And this is not any performance. This is just the number of students that participated in each level. And the state of Michigan has a goal of 1% or less of all students with an IEP taking one of these assessments. So you can see that Bloomfield Hills is working to decrease the number of students that are taking this assessment. So we are on the right track, or moving in the right direction.
So with MyKIP, which is the continuous improvement, we are always using our data to help us make sure that we are meeting our goals within MyKIP. So our goals continue to be systems of support through the multiple tiered systems of support, or MTSS, formative assessment for Michigan educators, which is as we looked at that balanced literacy thing, or not balanced literacy, balanced curriculum and balanced assessment, is the idea of making sure that we are catching our students in that formative stage throughout our curriculum, so that we're not waiting to a summative assessment to find out if a student is understanding the data, but really catching, or information, catching it sooner in the system. We are also using social emotional learning, restorative practices, and restorative justice, so students feel comfortable and safe in our buildings. If you feel safe, then you're able to learn. Working towards building deep thinking and engagement, learning through STEAM and centered maker learning with our new STEAM classes in elementary, just trying to embed that beyond that into the classrooms themselves, as well as our middle school and our high school programs. And then professional learning communities with targeted instructional time based on the data. So we have worked with PLCs at the high school, middle school, and elementary levels in terms of going on learning walks, understanding what your colleagues are doing, understanding how to use all of our new curriculums, what are strong instructional practices, and seeing it in action. So that is like a job-embedded learning that we are also doing within our district. So future focus in elementary, we are continuing to do K2 and 3-5 literacy programming. That includes the word studies, interventions, and small group resources. For K8 mathematics, it's the implementation of the Bridges mathematics, K through 5, as well as the idea of doing extension support and project-based experiences. That is embedded also within the Bridges experience in the new curriculum, so that will coming through, but also with iReady, finding ways that we can support the students if they have a gap in their learning or their understanding where it's targeted for them. We have targeted coaching in mathematics and literacy, both within our buildings with our elementary program specialists, as well as our teacher leaders in those content areas. And then we are working on STEAM and ingenuity experiences that create those experiential learning for students in both K-8. For middle school, we've done a lot of work in our programming. This is the second year of a new schedule. Last year, we had 90 minutes of math and ELA, or 88 minutes. This year, with feedback from teachers and students, we went to 65 minutes in all 4 core curriculum areas. With that, there are some increased expectations in science and social studies in terms of research-based experiential learning, full lab experiences so that they have more time. That was always, as a science teacher, the hardest part is doing a lab and not having time. We've given time, so those things can all happen. We are also working with our math. Those Envision students are coming through. Now there is a nice vertical alignment of the mathematics as they go through. We have 5 levels of mathematics that is offered at the middle school, from a Math 6 all the way through AP, pre-AP geometry with statistics. So that goes from 6th grade through 10th grade. Mathematics is available within our buildings. We do have a few students who are even advanced beyond that who attend the high school for mathematics and science. I think this year I have 4. And then with those longer periods of 65 minutes, we are working really hard with that social emotional piece within the classroom. They also have an integrated studies course as part of each day that helps them to also foster relationships with their teachers, with their colleagues, and with fellow students. And then professional learning continues in both of those areas. For high school, we have embedded more student support within the academic schedule. For junior year, last year we talked about, junior and senior year, we talked about that integrated studies course where we were hoping that we'd have a couple students engage in that. We have 150. So obviously it was a class that they really wanted, where it allows them to get additional support, specifically in math and ELA, but in other content areas as well. We are reviewing and incorporating equity grading practices that make students feel safe, comfortable, seen, and heard. We are advanced coursework, including AP and IB. We're continuing to investigate additional courses in those advanced areas, as well as additional CTE offerings for our students. That includes those new career-focused courses and curriculum to help students identify classes we already have in an area of interest that they have. So one of the things we've looked at, which is somewhat simple, but in our course book, we list courses by discipline instead of listing them by, hey, you want to be an architect? Here are some courses you might want to take. Here are some clubs you might want to join, to help even foster that idea of professional studies without changing a massive curriculum. We have all those classes there. It's just we're not presenting it in the right way. So finding better ways to market opportunities to our students. And then we are working with those social emotional foundations. You've seen the articles about the nests at Bloomfield Hills High School, the birdhouses and the nests. So again, another way to incorporate those connections across the building. And then we do PLCs at that level, as well as active learning for adults and our students.
So we included additional assessment information.
I believe it's 31 slides?
Yes, and data for you, but they're not actually part of our live presentation tonight. They're just there and available for your review.
So that's where we're going to stop for now, but we'll take questions.
Who would like to go first? John, go ahead.
I'm not sure what slide it is, but the heading is how many Bloomfield students participate in any level of My Access.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'm just confused by the data a little bit. It says goal is 1% or less of students with IEPs.
Correct.
But then the chart shows number of students, or is that
Yes.
percentage of students?
No, it's the number of students that have
Okay.
taken it to show that we are working towards decreasing the number of students to meet our 1%. We were last year above the 1% that we were expected to have, so we're working to decrease the number of students. So this is just showing that we are taking the steps necessary to make sure kids are taking the assessment that is best for them.
Can you describe what that means, goal is 1% or less of students with IEPs? Do we want the students
would
taking the
prefer-
test that they're supposed to take,
So-
or?
The state and the district would prefer that as many students as possible are accessing the more rigorous state standards versus the alternative standards.
Okay.
So that's what we're moving towards, putting more supports in place and giving students the opportunity to access that learning and then take the assessment that matches that learning.
Okay. But
Can they graduate with a diploma if they're in?
even with the state requirements, we're still trying to give the students the test that's appropriate for them? Is it?
We are. Like this year, we're still going to have to submit a waiver because we're over the 1%. But that's because when we were writing IEPs and deciding on the assessments, we made the decision that was best for students. But we're also trying to put supports in place to increase students' access to it as well. So it still would be the right test if we're able to provide the correct supports.
So when we show, say, it says 40 from 20, or 40-ish from 2023, is that 40
Students.
students, like, as a percent, and then as a percentage of elementary student? Because there's what, over 5,000 students in the district, I would think we would be.
40, so there's 40 students of the students that have IEPs, 40 of them took the participation level of my access. So what? so that-
Percentage, I guess I'm just
so that's
confused by
still-
this.
So we're
like-
still above the 1%, so it should be below that.
So the question is, how many IEPs are there in the district?
Is that what we're saying? So everyone so it's 1% of students with IEPs,
Yes.
so
So
40,
10% of your
40 would be
students have-
like
yeah.
4,000. I gotcha.
Sounds like a math equation.
It
Well, I'm
is.
just thinking,
You
like,
could probably extrapolate
And if
it.
Laura was here,
So if
she could
there's-
Off the top of my
probably
head,
tell
I'm not
you
going to
all
say
that.
it.
So if there's 400 with IEPs, you're at 4. I'm just trying to figure out how
Right.
far
Yes.
over are we, you
Right.
know?
Right.
Because you have one that says, we have this percentage, and then the chart shows a number, so it's
Yeah.
confusing as to, are we close or not, Like, I have no idea.
I don't know, Laura would know the answer to that better, but we were just trying to show that we have decreased the number of students.
Is there any penalty for not achieving the state's goal of this 1%?
At this point, I'm not aware of a penalty, but there is a rigorous process to prove that you've made the right decision, and I think it's more like over time, they've given you time to get there versus it has to happen tomorrow.
I just think, like, if there was like a funding, like, mechanism.
There
something
isn't, but the idea behind it is that you want students taking the state standardized exams because that continues you along a graduation path that allows you to do more successful post-secondary.
Sure.
So instead of saying, hey, our data is great because we have so many kids doing well, but we've put all these kids over here, the state's kind of putting a guardrail and saying, no, this is only for those students that really
Gotcha.
need it. And so I think it's less about us and more about putting in a guardrail across the state saying we're not going to just put students somewhere, we're going to actually build in the support so they can be successful on a regular graduation track.
I guess I would be interested in how close we are to that 1% goal, because the
We could get that
this
information
doesn't
to you.
really tell me.
I'm writing the questions down to confirm
Yeah.
with Laura about
I
it.
wouldn't want to hazard a guess out loud, but we can get that information to you for sure.
Trustee Flach.
Well, on top, is this when did this start? Was it 2023 with this 1% goal, or was it prior to that?
I want to say it was prior to that, but
Okay.
you were given time
Yeah.
to address it. So now they're
Okay.
kind of zeroing in more on it, saying, okay, like, it's coming, so we worked on that. But I think that we have students with IEPs who have gone through where we can't just automatically go and take it out.
Sure.
Yeah. And this-
I guess, like,
I don't know.
Just our wing-like students are in here,
Okay, got
not
it.
the
Okay.
rest of them.
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, fundamentally, I just wonder why 1%. I mean, I know that.
I think it's just a guardrail for the state. I mean, I think that there have been issues, and I'm going to say historically
Yeah.
across the board, about not providing the support for students to be successful. And so this is a kind of a guardrail to say, no, really pushing it back on the state, on the district to provide those
Yeah,
supports.
I get it. I think Yeah, it's something, I don't know if we saw this before. I don't remember seeing it before, but
It-
it was just something I guess
No,
going
sure, and
forward,
that's
it's
why
good
we
to
put it in there.
track.
I
Yeah,
think-
it's something we talked about
Yeah.
at Learning Services,
Yeah.
that because we're held accountable to this 1%,
Sure.
we should share that
Yeah,
information.
absolutely. I mean, it's a
So-
good goal. I understand the reasoning behind it, but it's
Right.
then, when we see the number, it's like, all right, what does that mean for us? How well are we doing? Are we performing well? Do we have work so, yeah, I think to John's point, just knowing for the future, because I don't remember seeing this come up, it is a good thing for us to look at, I think.
It
I'd
makes
like,
you reflect on your practice, for sure.
yeah, absolutely. Quick on the other items, some of this is just commentary. Like iReady, I think, is going to be a critical resource for us in achieving some of these goals, where we want to identify areas where we have gaps or weaknesses. To me, it's probably the number one tool, and I just want to make sure that as we continue to move forward from a budgetary perspective, whatever we need, that we've got adequate funding, time, resources for all the teachers that are involved in this, because I really think, as I've come to see it and be exposed to it, to me, it's probably the best way for an instructor to have the ability to get the missing pieces of the puzzle to every kid, and every kid's going to have different pieces that they're missing. And especially, like as we talked in the elementary setting, that's hard in a classroom to be able to find out which student is where, what do they need to get to where they need to be to. And by the way, you've got these students that are already past that. How do I help them continue to grow? I think this is the way we do it. So I just want to make sure we're highlighting that program as it becomes and comes into fruition, that we have all the resources we need. And you and I, another thing we talked about, AI,
Yeah.
in terms of opportunities, I know it's kind of a sort of on the same track as iReady, but I do see this as another way for us, and I know maybe this is like a David Shulkin thing, but to us to put it on the forefront, not just holistically, like what are we doing with AI to be, on the same level of what others are doing, but this is a way, I think, for us to look in a direction of saying, how can we use a tool to help us provide more instantaneous learning opportunities for those students, give them the power to shore up any gaps or weaknesses because teachers can't do it quickly. AI is a way to do that. So I think for David and his team, as they're going into that, that's probably a really narrow focus for us to look at. Instead of saying AI is like a whole playing field, which everybody does, like what are we doing with AI? We could narrow in and say, what are we doing with AI to help us improve in these specific areas where we need that assistance? So just something for him maybe to take on as we kind of explore platforms, which I know he's doing. That's it. That's all I had. And thank you. I know that's a lot of data. In our committee meeting, I appreciated all the in-depth discussions. I know we got down deeper, and I know that we talked about the need to focus on, the cohorts and improvements in those areas, as opposed to just looking holistically at ratings and rankings. I think you guys are laser focused on that, so I appreciate making sure that we're getting the most out of what we're putting into these activities.
And that's why we talking about the story, because when you look, we had the conversation earlier this evening about sometimes it's a cohort that goes through, sometimes,
Right.
but we don't, just because a fourth grade cohort didn't score as well, it doesn't mean we don't turn around and address that in fifth grade.
Right.
What we were saying is sometimes in the high school it gets a little bit harder because they're not in the same classes.
Yep.
So trying to capture everyone, and like, oh, we need to reteach this one unit. Well, they're scattered amongst all these different math courses. So
Yep.
it's catching them earlier, that's the formative part of it. Really helps us to fill in those spaces. iReady will also help us with that. And our teachers are amazing in terms of how they work to address what they see in the classroom. They lean on their colleagues. Sometimes they share amongst their, fourth grade goes for a tour, and some students go here and some go here to get the different skills they need. So that just adds to that toolbox that we have.
So, slide number says 23.
Tell me what's at the top, because ours
Oh,
are
sorry.
It's okay.
It's the question, how does the data change from year to year based on cohort of students?
Okay.
Which is basically what I think you were. getting
ELA or
into.
math?
ELA is the one I'm on.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Side note, before Trustee Van Gemert said this right out of the gate, in future presentations, if we could have the slides numbered, that would,
Oh, I already made that message.
yeah, sorry.
I don't know why, that's why.
Yeah.
Because I'm sitting here.
And I only know it's 23 because it's the 23 on the page here, so. I
That's the one.
Is that one the one you're looking at?
That is the correct.
Okay.
So I'm looking at, and I think you asked, I can't remember if I asked this question in the committee meeting or not, but for the MSTEP for fourth grade class of 25, is that how that reads, the very first one?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm looking at their score in comparison to the cohorts 26, 27, well, 28. So these are the students who are graduating, well, some of them, because they're not all,
These are
right?
current seniors.
Current seniors, right? So I'm looking at the progression, and I don't know if this is just like a kudos to, like, I don't know what has changed.
Envision math.
Right. So I just wanted to go back and highlight the 2028 and 2027 students. There's a lot of promise there. Was there something that changed? I can't remember in that year.
Not in that year, so the students that are graduating in 2029 had Envision math for almost their entirety of, if not their entirety of elementary school. This year's current seniors had it maybe for fourth and fifth grade. So you can see there's your fourth grade year was that low blue, and then it shot up to purple, and then sixth grade would have been that light green year. If I have that right, yeah.
Similar holds true for that, but these are ELA.
Oh, I'm
ELA.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Say,
there you go.
other color.
Yeah, so that, you'll see that jump up. And in fact, if you look at the 2025 year, again, this is the year, current seniors, 25% of them were in Algebra 1 in 8th grade. They went from everyday math to Envision math, and they also experienced the change over to big ideas. So they hit some math changes along the way in terms of their tenure with us, versus 26, 27, 28, 29, those graduating class years had Envision math, big ideas, a much more coherent year and a little bit less change in terms of their curriculum.
I think where the graph cuts off makes it look more dramatic also.
Yeah.
ELA, because you're saying, oh, this,
It looks
Well, and
scary,
like,
right?
fourth grade looks so low, but.
But even going back to the ELA one, if
I
you
don't know
go,
if I just buttoned this.
Compares.
I don't either.
Year to year,
Okay.
though.
so
The
like
colors,
even
the
at,
colors.
so I'm going to go back one more to the ELA. So even looking at that cohort of 2025 again, it looks like they dropped from PSAT to SAT. But if you remember, that's the highest score in the entire county for SAT. So because the tests change too, you can't
Yeah.
always just compare the scores, if that makes sense. And I can't speak to years that it's happened, but if you were asking back to that blue, my guess is that, and I know that Bloomfield has continued to add additional supports for ELA in addition to the core, like phonics supports and things like that. And I would think that that has probably also impacted that ELA score over time. I just can't speak to the years as I wasn't here when they've all been implemented, but.
But
Will
with
this
the-
be something that you'll show, I mean, because I know sometimes like we get different charts, but will this be something that will continue?
We'll
to-
continue to dig at it. I think that's the best word.
But, yeah, and my
I get
intent
it.
when I made these slides was I kind of looked at what you'd seen in the past, but I needed to make them mine. So I intend, unless you want to see something different, like I've
Yep.
already made a note next year, not the numbers for my access, the percentages. But I intend to show you the same things year after year so that, it's not a whole new presentation every year. So that,
Thank you
unless
for
there's
that. I
something missing
appreciate
or
that.
something that you're not interested in, you'll see the same sort of things this time next year.
Having the consistency matters, so I think, so thank you, but you answered my question.
Can you go to the SAT scores?
That we showed earlier, am I on the right one? This one? Or the actual score page?
The score page.
Tell me when.
I don't know. What does it say on the top?
What percentage of Bloomfield Hills School students met proficiency expectations?
You wanted just
Okay.
SAT?
I'm looking for the proficiency expectations. Must be earlier.
That was this one, but that was stuff.
Oh, yes.
Is this the right one?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is just ELA and PSAT.
Is MET proficiency the same as college ready?
So, yes, for PSAT, not for SAT, they will release them in 4 levels that align with the M-STEP. So yes, the top 2 levels would be considered on track to be college ready, where SAT is a little different because it is college ready, it's no longer on track. But that's why SAT is not in this one, just PSAT. So yes, they look at the 2 top levels of both as the same.
Okay.
So basically, in 8th grade, we're saying 70% of our students are on track to be college ready by the time they take the SAT. Okay.
Okay.
I don't know, someone might need to talk to the PSAT people. 'Cause I feel like it's supposed to be correlative, but they've been a little off for a
Yes.
while.
Yes.
And that's not
And the
unique
test has
to here.
changed.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
everywhere. And then this year's scores are also brand new, it's a brand new assessment. So it'll be interesting to see how the PSAT actually correlates to the SAT when this year's 8th graders get into 11th grade.
Yeah, because what will happen is last year's PSAT, our 9th graders' scores were on the old test.
No, they were on
Were they adaptive?
So that last year's, yes, so this current 9th grade took the new test, and that'll be the
Sorry,
first
so I
group
meant the
that we have
fir-
the 2 new
Yeah.
tests to really
I was
compare
thinking,
them to.
I meant 10th
Yes.
grade took the old test, but they'll be having to take the new adaptive test. So like, will those even correlate at all?
And I have asked College Board for some sort of correlation. Like when they change M-STEP, they try to release some sort of, this really means that on the new test. College Board is not even attempting that. So,
Like, just as your score?
yes. And if you look on one of the charts towards the back, there's a large purple box on the side, and it will tell you like all of the changes and like
Oh,
which
yeah.
years didn't test, when did we start with the because the PSAT was new in 1819, so some of the kids would have taken M-STEP and not PSAT in 8th grade. That was new right before COVID.
And then,
Then there was a year where testing was optional, so although we have scores, we don't know that how many kids came in to take, like it is not an accurate reflection of all of our students,
Yeah.
so.
I have a question.
yep,
You wrote on slide number 20 that state assessments are not designed to be diagnostic or drive day-to-day teaching and learning. So I'm just curious, I would like your opinion, comparing our scores to other districts around the area, what kind of assessment or opinion do you have about how we're doing based on these scores then? And what are you gathering comparing the scores? I'm just curious what your take is.
so when you so the slide up here is an example of us comparing ourselves to the top 5 districts in Oakland County, or traditionally the top 5. So we took a 5-year average. So this is all of our ELA and M-STEP, so grades 3 through 8. We are the lovely little dotted line that you see there. And so over the 5 years, our scores are now averaging above the other 5, if that makes sense. So what we're feeling is, and of course, 70% to 72.3% is not a massive difference, but it is showing an upward trend, as this accounts for all the fluctuations in the state testing as well, since we're all experiencing it. So what we feel is that we are doing really well. We are extremely competitive. We have other districts, as Todd is not here to talk about how he wants to win.
Correct.
So, but we are competitive within these range. Like this one here, again, it's the graph.
Yeah.
It's 77.9% between 76.2%. That is less than a 2% difference between us and the other top 5. So I think as a county, first of all, I'm proud of educators in the county of Oakland. I think that they have done an excellent job as a county, and then to be able to say that we are in the top 5 and doing as well as, if not better than them, I think puts us in a really strong place. Does that mean that we have room for improvement? Of course it does. But I think it allows us the space and the ability to really drill down to almost specific, what does this student right here need, versus saying a more comprehensive, we need to revamp our entire everything. So I think that that is the luxury of having scores like this, is it does afford us the opportunity to really drill down to specific needs of every single student versus worrying about whether or not we have the right program in place.
Yeah, I think that line in that so state assessments are not designed to be diagnostic or drive day-to-day teaching and learning. And I think that the state assessments, first of all, we're in a place where we don't need to always worry about tier 1, which is what it says. Like our core instruction is good and strong. So it gives us the ability to look at the individual needs for tier 2 and tier 3. It also gives us the ability to stop and have conversations about what we're seeing around the county. Who's going up? Why are they going up? What are they doing? So those are the conversations that we've been having at teaching and learning. So I feel like even though we're in a good place, even when we're for the SAT, we're all the way to the left, the top for both. Well, great, but what are the people that have the most growth doing differently? How can we learn from them? Todd would say steal, but how can we learn from them and make changes? So I think we're in a great place, but I think it still actually allows us to have better and deeper conversations instead of worrying about the core foundation. We get to figure out what others are doing, what little changes we can make, and how do we meet those individual student needs.
And for the layperson, what is tier 2 and 3?
So tier
mean?
1's your core instruction, and then tier 2 and tier 3 are the additional supports students get. The higher the number, the more intensive the support.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I got that correct.
So potentially pull out para coming in, working with a small group, all that, that's tier 2 and tier 2 and tier 3. Tier 1 is done by the teacher themselves.
Yeah.
So we have one slide
Go ahead.
We have one slide in my fall update, and how I'm summarizing this is in aggregate, it would be very easy for us to rest on our laurels and say, look at us, we're at the top. When we disaggregate the data, what they're saying is we see opportunities for improvement, and it affords us the opportunity to dig deeper and figure out exactly what our struggling learners are needing to improve scores for all. And so that's what I've been very impressed with in my time here thus far is one, the competitiveness of wanting to really achieve and figure out what practices and processes we can put in place in order to do so. And then the LST team collaborating, looking at this information, disaggregating it. You have 46 slides here that disaggregates it and cuts up this
That was
data.
a cut down.
We have a lot more.
It cuts this data up in several ways for us to really dig in and find out where our problem areas are, or areas of opportunity are, and we're doing that.
So you somewhat was connecting what my question was. Or is, and what are some of the things that you've found that we may need in our district that we are not necessarily doing?
I don't think we have the answers yet. I think we're still asking lots of questions, and then those questions will lead us down a path to dig in more, if that makes sense. We don't have any answers, we just have a lot of questions.
So, but there are, so for what I'm hearing you say, the best practices that you're identifying from other organizations or other institutions, not institutions. You know what I mean?
But,
Schools.
School systems.
School systems, yep.
So you're looking at those best practices. Are you looking at state, or are you looking at best practices nationally?
We're looking at best practices in education. I think one of the things that we're really careful about is we want to make sure that we are working within a sustainable model. So the idea of iReady is an example I've talked about. It's not the perfect panacea for everything. I am excited about it, but it also does allow us the opportunity to say, address some very specific student needs on an individual basis. The program can do that for us and really help us in that space. So that was one of the practices that we saw other districts that were successful around the country do. We investigated it, we looked at it, we determined that it was much more successful than FastBridge in terms of giving us that drilled down data to a specific student, to a specific lesson that they need, versus just saying the student is or is not achieving at grade level, which is kind of where we get a little bit of the FastBridge reading and writing tells us if the student's on target or not, but not specifically to the point of how we can support them in that space. So that's one example where we brought in iReady for that exact purpose. Other places that we are looking at is I think that our teachers do a phenomenal job, and I think giving them the space to do their job instead of saying that pendulum swing of well, you have 3 students here who are really struggling, so therefore we're going to change everything on you, but instead go in there and give them the support for just those 3 students. So being much more targeted in our support system for both teachers and students in terms of instructional practices in those places. So I think our core curriculum, we're very fond of and proud of our core curriculum, and especially in ELA and math, but making sure that we can help our teachers in that depth of knowledge of how the program can help them identify ways to support those students in their instructional practices, that we don't need to do a whole-scale piece. iReady is, I think, the piece that we thought we really were missing in terms of a true diagnostic in terms of what is happening, so we can find and support our students sooner.
So we're paying, iReady right now is from under, correct me, I could be wrong, I'm trying to remember all the committees, is grant funded, correct, right now?
This year, yes.
This year, yes.
So, but are we, if this ends up being something that we are finding is definitely supporting our students, have we thought about what happens at the end of the cycle? How do we sustain these supports for our students to continue to for the upward movement closer toward that 70%?
So it is entirely grant funded this year with a grant that will be expiring in September. However, the state of Michigan has a benchmark assessment reimbursement grant that very few assessments qualify for, that being one of them. So it will supplement a portion of each student's assessment, and the district is currently paying for FastBridge, and that would be ending. So there's some funds there that could transition. We don't have a quote for next year, but the intent is to align a number of different funding sources to make sure that that assessment gets to continue.
So it's as cost neutral as we can make it.
And I think we would prioritize it regardless. I really do. I think it will prove to be a tool that is effective to evaluate practice and performance, and allow us to make allow our practitioners to make instructional changes throughout the year. And many schools have these type of tools, iReady being one of several. So I would think as we go through our annual budget and we look at our priorities, I would think some sort of assessment tool would be top of the list.
And I know that you all will, if there are grants available, because you've been doing a great job at applying for those. So we do appreciate that and all of the magic that happens to make sure funding is supported. So thank you for that. I have no more questions.
Anyone else have any other questions or commentary? All right, thank you for your presentation.